All right, so let's just first take a few moments, just a few moments to ground and visualize the Buddha in the space in front of us. Really take a moment to feel his presence, his complete love, acceptance for all of us. And let's go ahead, take refuge, cultivate bodhicitta. Our first recitation is as though we are receiving this directly from the Buddha and repeating after him. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the positive potential I create by practicing generosity, ethics, patience, joyous effort, concentration, and wisdom, may I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. Taking a moment to deepen our motivation even more, I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the positive potential I create by practicing generosity, ethics, patience, joyous effort, concentration, and wisdom, may I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. And now, deepening our motivation even more, reflecting upon the suffering of all sentient beings, our heartfelt desire to be of benefit to them. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the positive potential I create by practicing generosity, ethics, patience, joyous effort, concentration, and wisdom, may I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. All right. Well, welcome. So glad that most of you, well, some of you made it back. And really appreciate your patience. Before we begin, I wanted to just take a little time to just question, answer anything that's maybe popping up. We tend to run out of time towards the end. A couple people at the very end last time, right after we were ending, popped up with a hand up. So I wanted to just take a moment, just invite anyone if you may have a question or something's coming up, or it could be a little bit off topic, something with your practice. Invite you to do that. We had a little different opening, so I think that lends itself for an opportunity to chat. So and if at any point something comes up, let's allow that opportunity. We are in, I don't see anyone doing that, so we are in some really deep waters here. We're in the wisdom section of the Path of Awakening. So this is how we liberate ourselves, how we free ourselves from samsara, simply by living in reality, simply by direct realization of the nature of self and phenomena. And so we're at this stage right here where we're unpacking something that is beyond concept. So it's challenging to get our toes in this water in a proper way. And it's been, I think, pretty wonderful. We've had some really good time at the retreat where we got to dive a little more deeply, understanding this dependent origination, the difference between inherent existence and this delusory way that things appear to us. So we've been unpacking, we've been touching, our toe in this water of emptiness. And so it's really important that we approach it in a thoughtful, meaningful way, one that's conducive for understanding, to avoid further misperceptions, to enable the conditions that will ripen, and to not get caught up in like nihilism, and not to go to these extremes, and really understand the difference between a conventional reality and an ultimate reality and how they work together. So this next section is we've been working on that. Now it's going to go a little more deeply towards that. And the key point that I always want to make is that we exist, phenomena exist. We just exist in a way that we don't recognize yet. And so this whole journey is about understanding our true nature of self and phenomena and going laser-like into that understanding to just piercingly dissect these misperceptions. So it doesn't require any additional belief. It doesn't require anything other than a real quest for understanding and investigation. On the retreat, where we spent some time going much more deeply, His Holiness is really talking about the importance of this analytical process. And so we do need to bring this analytical process into allowing us the conditions from which we can have some more deep understanding and experience. But it does start with some analytical precision. But as we engage in this, ultimately, we're going to go to a place beyond concept. We're going to go to a place beyond what we can talk about or analyze. It's going to be direct experience. So the analytical portion is really providing a gateway. And none of this, again, is to be just taken because it's to be investigated thoroughly. So that's kind of where we're at the text. I'm going to pop that up right here to where we were. And we wrapped up at the retreat on that point about how to approach this, like, approaching a goldsmith would approach testing gold. So I'll give this system just a moment here. Okay. I'm going to back up a piece. So, we've been unpacking this way that we perceive the world, the way we experience it, and the labels that we put on things, and understanding those labels are concepts. They're not actual physical phenomena, right? A table is a concept. It's not a physical phenomena. And the thing that we're identifying or labeling a table, well, it's got all these attributes and qualities and so forth, none of which is actually a table. And tables is this concept, a construct in my mind, but there's some phenomenon here. And understand how things come together, that they're made up of parts and pieces and conditions that gave rise to them. There's no independent, separate thing. Everything's interdependent. Everything is arising dependently, and so it's empty of this label that we're imputing upon it. That's what's empty. It's not that there's not a table here, but how I'm experiencing that table is going to be very subjective, especially as I develop a little more clarity and wisdom and experience. I can experience people, I can experience tables, I can experience lots of things very differently. And I can recognize this way that this phenomenon I'm experiencing comes into being, and my experience of elaborating something that I'm experiencing and adding qualities to it, filling it in, so that what I'm experiencing and what I am bringing to it, my experience, my karma, my klesha, the way I've lived and how I'm experiencing something, and all the things that come with that are not in that object. So to make it real clear, I'm seeing a bike in front of me. Our Dharma Center's also a bike shop, temporarily. But if I see a bike, even a bike, right, there's going to be a lot of different ways to experience a bike. Somebody who knows something about bikes is going, well, that's an expensive bike or not expensive bike. That's, uh, I like that color. I like that bike. I don't. I prefer a mountain bike, not a road bike. But also, what's my experience? Have I been injured on a bike before? Do I need a bike just to survive, to get to work? Is it my transportation or is it recreation? So just looking at what I'm calling a bike, I'm going to have a whole range of experience that I'm imputing upon that bike and that experience that is not in the bike itself, right? There's an experience that I'm having that is I'm bringing to it, as well as a physical object that I'm experiencing. But someone who uses a bike just to be able to get to work each day, I mean, has a very different relationship with a bike than someone who has a recreational bike that they, go out and do things with. And some people, have very little money to actually maintain a bike, and others, have quite a bit of resources and have several bikes. And again, am I injured with bikes, or, is bikes like a thing around the environment, and I'd ride a bike instead of a car. So when I'm looking at a bike, how I'm experiencing that bike is going to be very different person to person. And all of that experience that I'm having with the bike, probably don't need this, but all that experience that I'm having with the bike is going to be imputed upon, I'm bringing a lot to this experience. And it doesn't appear that way. I see a bike and I like it, I don't like it, it's this, it's that. And I don't understand that there's a very interdependent experience, that how I'm experiencing the bike has a lot to do with me, my karma, my experience, my clashes. And it's true of people, it's true of all phenomena. And emptiness, meaning it is empty of all those qualities that I am imputing upon them with my label. Which doesn't mean I can't ride a bike. If I know how to ride a bike and my legs are functional to ride a bike. So why is all that important? Right. And this becomes the critical piece, like, well, it's just a bike, ride it or don't ride it, get one, don't get one. But what happens is that by not questioning the fact that I'm actually bringing meaning to these events in my life, I'm a prisoner of the meaning I feel is forced upon me. So right now in our times, a lot of people stress, a lot of people have anxiety, a lot of things around. We've got the politics, we've got a pandemic, we've got social unrest, we've got economic trouble. We have all these things in these situations. And then I am finding myself, let's say, really stressed or worried about this or that happening, and that I'm a prisoner now of the meaning that I'm getting out of these events and how they're affecting me, which creates a lot of suffering and a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety. And what I'm not understanding is that I'm actually bringing all that meaning onto these events, and that they're not objectively inherent in them. It's an elaborative process. So elaboration, we have an experience, there's a sensation, a sense consciousness, whether it's I see something, I taste something, I hear something, experience something, I think something comes into my consciousness, and then I make sense of it, and a whole story or elaborative process takes place. If this happens, then that happens, then this thing happens. And then, there's this big event. all of which is happening in my mind. It's not happening in actuality. And I'm experiencing it in a very subjective way. It's not happening objectively to all beings. And the way that I'm experiencing it doesn't mean that something's not happening. Uh, but the elaborative process is something I'm bringing to it. And if I pay attention to any particular part of what I'm experiencing in a different way, I'm going to get a different experience. If I bring a different meaning to it, even, like a bicycle, or whatever event is going on, by paying attention to just how it's affecting me in this moment and long term, or, if somebody's doing something harmful, what aspect am I paying attention to about that? Are they suffering? Why are they doing it? What can I do about it? The moments of our lives, if we start to understand them generally, here we are seated. We're just seated. And, there's probably not a lot of physical pain right now. But if I bring up a topic, we could pretty quickly have some mental and emotional suffering, or some joy and some happiness. And if I shift how I'm attending to any of those things, I'm going to have a different kind of experience with it. But none of that is how it appears. It appears that this happened, it hurt me, this happened, it frustrates me, this happened, it made me happy, this happens a lot, and then I'll be happier. And our mind starts elaborating on all these events based on whether they make me happy or not happy, or they're just not that interesting. And then I attribute these qualities to these things and events, and then ultimately I wind up giving them a lot of power over my experience, when in fact I'm actually bringing a lot to the experience. So that's an entry point here of understanding why is this relevant. To start to understand is to start to understand that how I'm experiencing all of this has a lot to do with me. This is an inside job. My karma and my klesha is the filter and the lens through which I experience all phenomena and myself. But it doesn't, feel like that. It feels like those things are happening to me. And so as we unpack this process, this elaborative process, so we can get more closely focused on how things exist, the sensations, the experience, the intake that comes in, and then watch that elaborative process. I don't like this better than that. Like the story, that person's a jerk, and I just fill in this whole thing. Well, we don't have to do all that. And we don't have to get caught up, and we don't have to have a lot of misperceptions about myself and about things. And we have all of these misperceptions that we carry with us. I was just talking to someone last night that has done a lot of inner work, has done a lot, and was having to caretake for her mother, and some old sort of triggers popped up as these old habits or ways of being. And she was so frustrated with herself. She was seeing that I still have these things about me. Those things are still part of me, and we could easily get like that, right? Don't we think, well, I still have a lot of work to do. That's I'm still kind of an impatient person, or I'm this kind of a person. And when we were talking, I said, well, that quality that you're talking about, that you say is still there. Well, is it really always there, or is it only there sometimes? Like for most of her life, that's not there at all. She hasn't been, emotionally hooked like that, with that kind of a reaction in a long time. So it's latent, right? Much of the time. And when it arises, then the idea, the quality, the thought process is, I still have it. When in fact, I'm not really carrying it moment to moment. It arises sometimes, once in a while, in dependence upon a condition or an environment and what I'm bringing to an environment as it arises. But when it happens, I think it's me. I think I am like that. And I forget that there's most of my life where I'm not like that. The I that's arising in a moment most of the time is not impatient or not that way or not hooked in that way. It doesn't have those feelings. Those feelings are very temporary and they're an experience I have for a short period of time. They're not who I am. And I don't have to be a prisoner of them. But our mind, will tell us this is who I am, this is my kind of personality, it's my nature, as though it's this hardwired thing that I am, day to day, when in fact I'm becoming in every moment. And how I'm arising in a moment has a lot to do with the conditioning I've been providing myself. And so what I water grows, and the things that I do become habits, and those habits start seeing things in a particular way, and I start reinforcing that, and I'm creating, my sense of reality. And I think that that's an objective reality instead of a very subjective reality. And I don't recognize that if I change my karma, I change my experience, I change my lens through which I get to experience everything. The analogy I like to use a lot is the dirty windshield. I'm experiencing all this through a very dirty windshield. And so karmically, I can start clearing away that windshield. I can see and experience people and things more clearly without all the stories and elaborative processes that we fill in. Still fill it in, but not as much. But that's all coming from this side, not that side. So this is why it's so critical to start to understand the deceptive way that people, places, things, emotions, appear to us. And know that I can use my conventional experience here. There is a truth to them, and as a guide to start to understand myself and to start to understand phenomena. So it's very meaningful if we investigate. But if I don't investigate, then I'm going to continue a way of reifying, making real these events, people, places, things, events, and the labels I put on them, as though is their qualities, and then I'm a prisoner of how they affect me. And I'm going to spend my whole life trying to get all that right so I can be happy, for a moment, as opposed to change my experience and understand the real source of happiness and well-being, these virtuous activities, karma, and wisdom that actually allow me to be much more joyful, meaningful, and my life more meaningful, and a lot less troubled, and a lot less stressed, and a lot less worried, and a lot less anxious. Because my mind will tell me that my stress, of course, is related to, if this happens, I'll be happy, right? And that does just not hold up, right? How many times in our life, if this happens, and how much of our life do we put on hold? I can be happy when, or when this happens, or if that happens. And then how long are you happy for? How long until some other stress, worry, or fear shows up? Even though we had all those things happen. And the mind doesn't even question it. It still gets into, but when this next thing happens. And so we become a prisoner of a faulty way of experiencing the world and where our happiness comes from. We think it's real. So the foundation of Buddhism is that all of these mental and emotional pain and struggle, suffering, is dependent upon misperception, depending upon misunderstanding, and these qualities and exaggerations that we attribute to the phenomena of people and events in our lives. And they can't arise if we see clearly, if we live in reality. The seeds of anger, those seeds of anxiety, those seeds are in my consciousness, not in those events. And they arise in dependence upon those events, coming into contact with our experience, our senses. But that's really not how we're experiencing the world usually, right? And so there's this gradual process of creating the conditioning, good karmic virtuous activity, along with this understanding of dependent origination, this interdependent experience that I'm having. It's momentary arising that I can start to create these conditions to be more clear, and have a mind that's trained. So morality, concentration, right, a stable mind, and now unpacking, the real sort of elaborative process that we get caught up in. So we can start to back that down a little bit and experience more accurately what's arising in a sense level. I'm gonna just blow my nose here, so I'm gonna mute the microphone. It's embarrassing me just a moment. Okay. I'm going to have surgery on Friday, so I'm going to fix all this. I'll be able to breathe through my nose again. So Friday's surgery, and then 1 week from Friday, they'll take everything out, and should be good as better than I've been in a long time. So we'll see about next Wednesday. I may be able to teach, or we might have an alternate option. So I'm just going to pause there. I've kind of throw out, quite a bit here in terms of how we misperceive the world and why it's so important to start perceiving it more accurately. How's this helpful? And just see if anyone's having anything arise or questions or thoughts. If so, you can raise your hand or type in a question in the little Q&A button. Maybe I'll scan the text here. The next portion of this text gets, we're starting to get into deep water. That's why I'm taking the time to once again just refresh our preliminary approach here. Okay. Let's take a little look at the text. We'll get our toe in the water. Trying to think if there's anything else that could be helpful here. The main takeaway at this point is to recognize that we actually have a lot more to do with our life experience than we even know. And while we are subject to physical pain, body, like, I can't breathe through my nose and things of that nature, the mental and emotional suffering is totally unnecessary. And it arises upon misperception. So it's often taught in this framework of the the nature of reality, these three aspects of reality, that the way our experience is, and things are impermanent. Everything's impermanent. We forget that. We try to make things permanent. These are the three marks of existence. I was trying to pull up that title, Three Marks of Things Are Impermanent. The things are unsatisfactory. There's no thing, event, person, food, even, believe it or not, even the ice cream is not going to provide me any lasting happiness. It's always going to, the very thing that I think is going to create my happiness is always going to be unsatisfying. It's never quite going to get there. And then our sense of self, our misperception of self, our not self, what we identify with, doesn't exist in the way that, we grab onto. And so if we look at, is there any stress, any anxiety, any worry or fear that doesn't relate to wanting to make something more permanent than it is? My house, my relationship, my job, whatever. My body, my life. This will come, this will go. Even my plan for today. Is there, so a lot of stress is just around that. Not accepting what's happened is a big source of suffering. And, this happiness being based on events, people, places, things as a cause, that, thinking that's going to provide me some lasting happiness. How much stress is really going around? If this happens or that happens, I'll be happier, or this will be terrible. And then a grasping to a sense of self, this thing I'm carrying with me every day about who I am and about the issues I have and about, my qualities that I don't recognize are changeable, that I feel like I'm stuck with. So these three marks of existence, impermanence, unsatisfaction, and not self, misperception of self, they're going to just be the source of so much mental and emotional suffering. Whereas if I knew things are impermanent, I'm going to try to make them permanent. I'm going to understand the very nature of my experience with a short period of time. My feelings are short. Right? I'm not angry forever. I'm not happy forever. I'm not, even my experiences will come and go. Things are impermanent. Things are dependently arising. And if I understand that all of this is an opportunity for me to gain wisdom, to cultivate merit, to train my mind, it is essentially that everything becomes an opportunity, and there's no reason really ultimately to suffer at any level, is that I can start to recognize that every event I'm experiencing is an opportunity to cultivate merit and wisdom, a path of awakening, an opportunity to recognize and learn and grow, experience myself and others more accurately, to cultivate merit by interacting with virtue and compassion and kindness. What's there to have anguish over? How can I be helpful? That's a hard attitude to maintain, right? So that's why we need training. We need to remind ourselves, and we need to notice how I elaborate onto the events and exaggerate them. And it gives me a very skewed perception of reality, which then imprisons me in my emotions. Instead of understanding I'm being triggered, there's a cause for that. There's some conditioning, and I'm not a prisoner. I'm just experiencing them for a short period of time. Which still means we feel love, we feel compassion, we experience sadness, we can have tears come down our face, the Dalai Lama cries. But you get to experience it without being identified with it. I get to experience sadness, to feel that connection with others, to have empathy and understanding with my fellow beings who are also struggling and suffering. In a way that is more accurate, recognizing the misperceptions that give rise to people doing harmful things and people having these challenges, and understanding that we can be of ultimate benefit by developing ourselves so we can be really helpful. So that's that bodhicitta motivation that can give rise to, I'm in this to help all beings. But in order to do so, I'm going to need to have good ethics. I'm going to have to train my mind, just have that ability to be more present, available, and then start to be more aware of the elaborative process and how I add to situations. And see if I can stop doing as much of that. Can I hold my elaborative process at an appropriate level? And there's appropriate level. I mean, we do need elaborative process, right? We need to fill in the picture to a degree, but we don't need to go beyond, right? I see someone coming at me and they look angry and they're holding a gun. I can fill in a picture that says this is probably, not very safe. But when somebody does something mean, I don't need to go through the whole elaborative process of thinking that they're an evil person and make up a whole story about not even seeing that they can do anything good in their life. That's going a little bit over. Don't need to get caught up in saying the worst day ever in my life. This day is so long. Just those processes where we just go over reality versus let's be observant of this experience we're having and add to it as much as appropriate and necessary so we can function, be well, be healthy, see some sadness on somebody's face, recognize they're sad. How can we help? And but it's not the worst thing ever, right? And then we can also recognize, all the amazing qualities of people helping each other. How many things have to go right in the world for us to have the life we do? How many people are genuinely helping, kind, which we could get obscured by if we focus on this one aspect of our culture that's not going the way we'd like. So having clarity, balance with that. So this is the advice that I have, is this process as we engage in this wisdom teachings that we're going to unpack is, to notice how we elaborate and add on to, certain qualities and aspects to people and events, and how we exaggerate them, how we build them up, and how that then triggers us to have stress, worry, and fear, even joy and meaning, which, that thing I have all this joy and meaning around breaks, and then I'm, broken up, and, I can't do this. That's what makes me happy versus, I'm really hoping this doesn't happen because I don't like that, versus if this happens, what can I bring to it? How can I use it in a meaningful way, this event, this experience? So there's this incredible opportunity to eliminate a wide range of suffering by just not over elaborating on our experiences, bringing that down, and allowing the experience, a temporary one, to come and go, to observe it, to watch how we interact with it. Felt like there was one more thing coming up there. So let me just pause there. We've got 5 more minutes. Once again, make available. Oh, it looks like we do have a question. I'm sure all this is clear as mud, so it's no reason you'd have any questions. All right, good question. So thank you. Okay. How do we reconcile self-discipline, concentration, and the other perfections with the lack of inherent existence self? Yeah. So the self doesn't inherently exist, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And so here we come into, it's a great question, really important question. And this is where you're touching on something that gets a lot of people in trouble, and it's something that we unpacked and Most Holiness made a big point about earlier in the text, is if I start running into the idea that I don't exist, then, you know, what about these qualities about discipline and virtue and these attributes and these things that I'm cultivating, self-discipline and so forth? If I don't exist, who's doing this, and why would I do that? And then we get into sort of, you know, nihilism that gets us in a lot of trouble and gets us away from virtuous activity and training and so forth. So it's an excellent question. I really appreciate that. So inherent existence versus existence, right? So it's not that I don't exist. There's an appropriate, valid designation of John on this body. I've got a birth certificate and everything. And so it's an appropriate, valid designation. Labels are meaningful. Labels are useful. It's a functional reality. Sometimes I like to use that word, this sort of functional reality that we are experiencing. So currently at this moment in my continuum of consciousness, I'm arising based on my karma and conditioning and events. And as preceded this moment, I'm arising in a particular way, in a particular body, and experiencing phenomena in a particular way. So the karma, the kleshas, the conditions, the environment that has all given rise to this dependently arising John exists. But I don't exist independent of all of those conditions. I don't exist independent, you know, separate from all of those conditions. I don't exist separate from you even right now in this moment, because sort of arising in dependence upon teaching here in this moment. So you're a part of that and the room I'm in and so forth. So I do exist, and I exist in dependence upon. That's what gave rise. And it's sort of this key about I'm not independent, not inherently existent, separate. And so knowing that and knowing that I'm a continuum, well, then the self-discipline, the virtue, the qualities of that I'm bringing to my consciousness and my experience is going to alter my experience. So I'm not cultivating an inherent self. I'm cultivating a dependently arising self. Right now, I'm arising in dependence upon with self-discipline, these 6 perfections even. I'm cultivating a dependently arising self. And that dependently arising self, this continuum of consciousness, will be able to see more clearly, experience more clearly, and shed the misperceptions that grasp onto an inherent self. But if I don't create those conditions, the dependently arising self is going to stay confused and see themselves as an inherent self. So hopefully that's helpful with that question. These understanding how I am contributing to a dependently arising self. You know, that dependently arising self, I can help guide that whole process in relation to teachings and my events and the people I put myself around, the conditions I cultivate. And what happens is, and I think this is the interesting piece, a lot of people get out a little too far and don't recognize that we are, Jatsuma Tenzin Palmo is really good at this. She makes this point that we really need a healthy sense of self to proceed in the path of eliminating that self. We are not going to get very far if we don't have confidence, a sense of well-being, an ease in a way of interacting with the world and others. And so a huge part of this process is developing a healthy sense, a dependent self that can function in a functional reality, conventional reality, in a real healthy way without a big elaborative process, and develop a sense of worth and value, confidence, and a real affection for ourselves, which is different from self-cherishing, an affection for the Buddha nature, for the qualities that give rise. Really important. And so that nurturing process of cultivating a healthy sense of a dependently arising self that we eliminate. But it's a process of being healthy and well and comfortable and then letting go. And unless we're very healthy and well and balanced, we're not going to get very far. Really good question. Really appreciate that. Hopefully the answer is helpful. Okay. All right. Well, we are at the hour, so this is good. I'm really happy that we had an opportunity to, really set the stage here, because the next pages we're getting to, we're gonna get into some deep water or some thin air, depending on your perspective. And we're going to, start unpacking this a bit more. We're going to get actually right after this next section, the Heart Sutra. And we're going to get into things way out of my league. But I think we can read them and plant some seeds that will be healthy and provide some nourishment for our potentials to grow. Got one more question here, looks like popping up maybe. So, healthy lingo. So, investigate the experience for the self and other. I do think, so sorry, there's a question to everybody else. I'm reading this as though you can read it. But just made the comment that, would you say that perhaps the key to practice to be always investigating the experience for the self and other? And I think that's very key. And when I say investigate for self, not always, looking for is one thing, but watching much more how that self arises in different ways in dependence upon how I am attending to other or attending to self. And that's a very important thing to play with, is to start noticing how the self that's arising, John, is arising in dependence upon how I'm attending to John, or how I'm attending to someone else, maybe even feeling insecure, feeling confident or not. Or do I see that person as a competitor or someone that I rejoice for that's doing well? If I shift how I attend to or the perspective of someone, something, and watch how that my sense of self changes. There's a nice experience there. But what we'll get into is these very direct vipassana type meditations where we can examine that self that you're you're making a point of is that we get a strong sense of self. That's a common technique, is a strong sense of self. Anger, frustration, we have a very sense of I right there, that we can investigate that, and we're going to find, we'll learn a little bit about that self. So yeah, to always investigate how I'm arising. But the key is to not identify with that, like I am. So a really good practice is to even change our language. Somebody asks how you're doing, well, asking ourselves how we're doing, am I angry, or am I happy, or am I sad? I mean, conventionally, it's a good way to talk, right? People get that. But really, in my mind, understand I'm experiencing some happiness right now. I'm experiencing some sadness, which is different from I am sad, because I'm not the sadness, I'm experiencing it. And so those types of processes within my mind, experiencing self, I think are really helpful. But we still want to feel the sadness, right? We don't want to be disassociated. We just want to experience it. But I'm not the sadness, but I'm experiencing it. And so that's a good way to investigate a sense of self and other too. Looks like we got one more chat. Excuse me. Okay, that was just a thank you and prayers. Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you for offering prayer for my surgery. Should be pretty straightforward day. One day in the hospital. All right. Well, let's now go ahead and dedication. I'm going to put it up on the screen so we can. I'll do the same one. All right, so let's just take a moment to be in this moment. And let's reflect upon the merit and the wisdom that we've all accumulated by engaging in this path of awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. Let's now dedicate. By this merit may I soon attain the enlightened state of Guru Buddha, that I may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline but increase forevermore.